Mississippi Live, the Element Wealth Studios are at two Mississippi museums today. We've got Veterans Day coming up tomorrow. Joining us now right here at two Mississippi museums is the Adjutant General of the Mississippi National Guard, General Jansen Boyles. Always good to see you, General.
You too, Gerard. Appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. Ceremonies this morning out here on the concrete pad. Really enjoyed the National Guard band. They're pretty good, aren't they?
They are, and they actually played at the fair this year and had some sessions at the fair. They really enjoy entertaining, and they do very well. And they can do jazz bands. They can do other things besides just military events.
They're very good.
They're very good.
They're excellent. Yeah. All right. So tell us about the ceremonies this morning. What happened there?
So our association partners with the museums to do this event, and it's really a wonderful event where we just invite veterans to come and be recognized, and we have a program that recognizes at least one veteran a year, typically someone we've lost. And today we recognized a Brigadier General Joe Leslie, who I actually knew personally.
Okay.
But just a wonderful ceremony this morning, and they just did a great job, and of course the weather cooperated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's important as Americans, is it not, General, to take some time to reflect on the service and the sacrifice of our veterans, and to honor them as we do, which we'll be celebrating tomorrow on Veterans Day across the nation. It's still important that we do that in our society.
It is, and maybe pay it forward is an overused term, but I'll tell you that I am who I am in the military because of the men and women that came before me. They were an example for me. They mentored me. They encouraged me when I needed encouragement. And we just need to remember the contribution they've made to just our peace and security, but also to the leadership we have currently in the military. I could name 10 or 12 gentlemen who served in the Vietnam era that were real mentors for me. And so we just need to recognize their service and sacrifice.
That's a good point. You bring up the Vietnam era, and I think you and I are at the age, we were just behind that from an age perspective. That it was a generation before us, I think is maybe one way to put it. But we are steadily losing our World War II veterans.
We are.
Not many left. Honestly, out there. And so the Vietnam era veterans, most of them in their 70s, they're aging as well. And I call attention to that, General, because that is one of those wars that was very controversial, obviously, but these men and women were just called to serve. Their country called on them, and they just did it because that's what you do when your country calls you. And though, honestly, politicians may fight about the merit of that war, it's the military that's caught up in the middle of it, and they just go where they're told to go. And in this case, they went into extremely difficult circumstances. Many of them didn't return home. Yeah. But it's important that we still recognize them. They don't, maybe sometimes are a bit of a forgotten generation of war heroes, but we still need to do that.
Yeah, and I'd sort of argue that point in that they're probably forgotten by the general population.
Yeah.
But I will truly tell you that the colonels and the general officers and the senior NCOs who were mentored by that group, I mean, they came back to the National Guard, a number of them after serving on active duty, joined the Guard to get their 20 years or whatever. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, I had really, truly some men who had served in some tough combat situations who mentored me as a lieutenant and a captain, and I know other men currently serving at my level can tell you the same thing. So we have not forgotten the impact they had on us. And think about this. Because of that mentorship, I'm making decisions today based on what they taught me to do. So the Vietnam veterans do have, the ones who contributed to the next generation of military leadership, have had an impact because we learned from them. And so that, I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. And they are honestly a group that dealt with incredibly difficult horrendous circumstances, and often without the support of the nation for what they were doing, which made it even more difficult. Also, the Korean War, I don't want to leave them out. I had a text here on the ceasefire text line. Certainly wasn't trying to omit them in the discussion.
No, that whole group is a special group, the World War II group, the Korean group, the Vietnam group, and, of course, all of those veterans who have served after that are all special. And I'll tell you, I sort of missed the Korean mentorship piece because they had all gotten out.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're talking about Vietnam right now, because it affects the current leadership.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's all.
It's just based on time.
Yeah.
All right, so tomorrow, Veterans Day. We're going to be down at Camp Shelby. You and I have visited down there before at the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum. What a state treasure that is. Tommy Loft and his group do a fantastic job with that deal. But Mississippi has a rich history in its service, in its military service.
I would encourage everybody to go see that museum. It's really incredible. And, you know, just so people understand what to expect, it tells individual stories all through the museum. It's not, it's, I guess you have the character of the wars that we fought over time, but it's really interesting to learn about the people who have either lived in Mississippi and served, or we served in the National Guard, of course, or formations who came through Mississippi at Camp Shelby before they went on to serve in other places. And because we just celebrated 2 divisions, I think there were 4 remaining active men who had been in these 2 divisions that came through Camp Shelby back in World War II.
Yeah.
And then also the people in Mississippi who supported Camp Shelby and their individual stories, like the young lady who won the National Riveting Contest, I think, and the trophies there on display.
Yeah, sure are.
So,
it's awesome.
So just some really neat stories.
It is so well done. And then, of course, where we are here today at 2 Mississippi museums, what fantastic treasures they are for the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, a lot of great stories here also, and you've got a flavor of military here, but it really tells the story of Mississippi.
No doubt about it. And, of course, that is woven into our military. I spoke to Chief Warrant Officer CW5, Donnie Dukes, earlier on the program, and he was awesome. But he talked about having the opportunity to speak at his first or second grader school this morning, and he got some tough questions, as children will do. And some of those, frankly, choked him up a little bit, got him a little emotional when they asked him about it, because they see the military, they understand the military is a fighting force, and then their job is to retard the enemy, essentially. So he got some tough questions. I'm sure he handled them masterfully. He's excellent at what he does. But it's important, is it not, General, that our rising generations understand the role and the value of the military and respect our military as well.
Yeah, and Gerard, I'll tell you that what's interesting is at the national level, the Army's having a tough time recruiting. I mean, the Army is 445,000 men and women, and they missed their mission by 40,000 people this year. The National Guard nationally was only about 2% below. We missed ours by about 6,000 out of 335,000. So we're really in pretty good shape. Yeah. But it begs the question, what are we doing that we're missing those 40,000 young people that are interested? I would argue that if I am a young person out there looking for an opportunity, the military is a great place to go, right? Because those jobs are out there, those opportunities are out there, and if you got that kind of gap, there's some promotion opportunities out there also. So
makes total sense. Yeah. So also with respect to the National Guard, what do you guys got going on these days? We've got about a minute or so left. We'll catch it on the other side of the break, but give us an update on the Guard.
I'll do that after the break.
We got about 30, 40 seconds here.
So I'll just give you one snippet right now. Under the term Homeland Defense, our MPs are actually deployed both to the border and up to Alaska doing a federal mission up there. And then we've got other units that we are going to be deploying after the first of the year overseas, and I can tell you about that when we get back if you like.
Yes, we got a bit of a report on that from Donnie Dukes. Says guys are going to be flying around and moving around here pretty soon.
They
Is that
are,
right?
Yeah. About 2,000 out the door at one time.
2,000, wow. Well, let's talk about the details on that when we come back. We've got the Adjutant General of the Mississippi National Guard, General Jansen Boyles, our guest here at 2 Mississippi Museums. Middays is coming right back. The Element Well Studios relocated today down at 2 Mississippi Museums in advance of Veterans Day. We're talking to the Adjutant General of the Mississippi National Guard. That would be General Jansen Boyles. So, all right, General, tell us what sort of plans you got on the boards for the National Guard. You got some deployments coming up. You touched on that before we went to break.
We do, and so one of the tenets of the National Defense Strategy is to provide protection for our partners and our allies across the world and for ourselves.
Sure.
And so by doing that, we deploy, units overseas to either help train other countries or provide hold ground in areas where we need to have a presence. So Mississippi is participating in that. This next year, we rotate units out about every 4 to 5 years to do these kind of missions. Next year is just an interesting deal where we're seeing our aviation brigade headquarters with an aviation team out of other states to the Mideast, and so they'll be all over the Mideast holding ground. Our engineer brigade out of Vicksburg is going over with engineer units from other states. They will be the headquarters for the Middle East, holding ground. And then our 155 brigade that everybody's familiar with out of Tupelo, the headquarters is going to be going to a training mission in Europe, Eastern Europe, so you can think about what that's entailing. And they'll be overseeing units. They'll be doing training with our partner countries there. And then about 900 soldiers out of the 155 will be deploying overseas to hold ground in the Middle East, and they'll be doing presence patrols, those kind of things, doing some training with the Saudis and other countries in that Middle Eastern area. So it's going to be an active year for us next year.
How does that work, General? Because many of members of the Guard, they got full-time jobs as well. So their employers, by law, right, are required to allow them to serve when they're deployed like this. Is that how that works? Yeah.
And Gerard, I would think that by now, after 20 years of doing this, our employers are sort of seasoned experts on how we do this.
I certainly had it happen as an employer,
And it's interesting. Employers are very supportive.
Yes.
The employers that we deal with are very supportive. I'll tell you about a third of our formation are full-time guardsmen.
Okay.
So I've got one more unit that's going to Germany as a maintenance unit. I'd say about 50% of that unit is full-time guard, and they work on tanks and wheeled vehicles. Yeah. So I'm an employer.
Okay.
Let them go downrange also.
I understand, yeah.
But the other two-thirds, they might be policemen, they might be firemen, they work for private industry, and those teammates, those partners are very supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been my experience as well. I mean, generally speaking, businesses understand the value and the role, and they know often, and look, we'd love anytime we had opportunities to hire folks that served in the Guard. They're pretty good people. You can count on them being good people, and they're going to be good employees. And so the little bit of sacrifice you have to make as an employer to accommodate their schedules while they're serving in the Guard is a small price to pay to get really good employees.
I do, and there's some other pieces to it. For example, we do a lot of leadership training, and so an employer gets the benefit of our leadership training during our annual training periods and everything, or they might go off to a school. And I think that complements what the employer gets back in return for their investment.
And there's no question that the military has been training leaders and managers for a long time. They understand how to manage large organizations in particular, and large organizations with complex organization charts. They're the best in the world at that, honestly. And so much of our private sector has adopted those templates.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, this Ukraine problem set that we've got out there, the way we train our leaders in the military, in the U.S. military, we sort of take for granted, and the rest of the world doesn't do it the way we do it. We have sort of a flat leadership program where we empower people at the lowest level to make decisions and be leaders. This Russian formula is a vertical line. And so their decision makers are at the top. And then that soldier at the bottom is expected to execute that decision from the top. We've seen that play out in Ukraine, and we taught Ukraine how to do it our way. And so we think that a lot of the success on the battlefield is from empowering those lower-level enlisted and NCOs to make decisions.
Yeah, that's awesome for you to bring that up. I was just reading yesterday in preparation for some remarks I delivered to a leadership class. I like to always refer to General Douglas MacArthur, who's written quite a bit about leadership and his views on that. And as he talks about, I think there's 11 qualities that he states are key traits of effective leaders. And one of those is that you empower your subordinates, using kind of the term of the day back then, empowering subordinates. And then he said, are you a dictator or a delegator in your leadership style? It still applies today, here 70, 80 years later.
Yeah.
No question.
And you know, some of that's going to be personality driven. Yeah. But the success of the U.S. military is simply that we empower people at the lowest level to make decisions. And because you simply can't anticipate anything from your perch as the leader. And hopefully what you've done is train them and given them the tools and the information and the knowledge to make those tough decisions, which in the military are often life or death, of course. Right. So, and I'll say it's been good to see the Ukraine problem set again, because now these other countries who might have been reluctant to adopt our ways of training and empowering, they're now asking a lot of questions.
Seeing that not work out so well.
So our relationship, every state has one or two relationships with other countries. So Ukraine and California were tied together, and California had a standing relationship with Ukraine, still does. Ours is with Uzbekistan. You've heard that before.
Yes.
And so Uzbekistan is asking us a lot of questions. They're a Central Asian, old Soviet bloc country, and they're saying, so show us this way that y'all do business compared to the way we do business. And so it's interesting.
Well, that is fascinating to hear, and I think I would regard it as positive. Maybe we can sway them to become part of our coalition as opposed to being under the thumb of the Russians, honestly.
Just building blocks.
Yeah.
You know, just providing military building blocks. Of course, it's much larger than that. It's got to be economic. It's got to be diplomatic and those things. But that's one little piece we can do to help the relationship.
It's good to hear. That's awesome. Well, what about, I saw you speak the other day, and you talked about some new assets that might be coming our way, right, into the Guard here in Mississippi.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we're competing for assets all the time, in the Pentagon, and we've got, I'm not sure I want to say on radio,
whatever you're comfortable with.
We're chasing some aviation assets, and we're chasing some assets for the 155 that we think will make us more relevant. Not that we aren't relevant now, but it just makes us more attractive to the Pentagon and the people who dial our number when they need us. But I will say this. So we are doing this. We are, the Mississippi National Guard has a great reputation nationally for our maintenance and our know-how and our knowledge, especially at Camp Shelby, where we have a lot of maintainers. And because of that, because we're so good on tanks and tracked vehicles, the Pentagon has selected us to issue tanks to the Tennessee National Guard. They've selected us to issue tanks to the North Carolina National Guard. And that's great payroll. It's great revenue for the state when we do that. But they've also selected us to provide training for the Taiwanese down at Camp Shelby.
Interesting.
And to show them how our equipment works so that when they go back home, they can maintain our equipment. And there will be a relationship there where we'll send some maintainers over there to help them out and train them on their tanks. And so the Mississippi National Guard is very involved in the current events going on around the world. And Taiwan's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, of course, involved very much so in the local community and within the state, most recently helping out with the water situation in the city of Jackson. And you said something that caught my attention the other day, General, which is you heard a lot of positive feedback from the ranks where they said, this is what I signed up to do, that they enjoy seeing the benefit of their service to their fellow citizens within the state.
Yeah.
And certainly that was in play here.
You know, and we've talked earlier, I mean, we've been talking this whole time about deployments and overseas and world events and those kind of things, and it really, during the COVID response, I'd go around and talk to soldiers, and that's what I mentioned the other day, and airmen who were out there working also. And a young lady just put me on my heels. When I was talking to her, and she said, "Sir, you know, all these deployments are great, and I'll serve and go and deploy every time you ask me to do that, but this community service is why I signed up to be in the Guard, helping my neighbors and friends and church and schools." So
makes total
sense.
Feel good.
Makes feel good.
It's got to be good to get that feedback too, as well, because it gives the purpose and it kind of reaffirms why you did it, why they did it. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
General, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on. Thanks, of course, for your service, for the service of our veterans, for the men and women who serve in the Mississippi National Guard as well. I know we'll be talking to you soon.
Happy Veterans Day. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. General Jansen Boyles, the Adjutant General of the Mississippi National Guard of the state of Mississippi, has been our guest. We're going to step aside for